I'm curious to know what your thoughts on Matthew 18 in depth.
In which verse? You all of 18? Let's start at the beginning.
Yeah, like from 15 on, and then even into 21, 22.
So either the interpretation is we're talking about the universal church or we're talking about the local church.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that what Christ is setting up here is for people that know people intimately and are going and bringing people within that community. So this is a local church, and think about the context of this verse. You don't have 15 churches on the one road that is Church Row that you can hop along and say, oh, there's a message in Revelation this week. Oh, there's an Old Testament youth group that I want to go to in this one. And you could literally be denied taking communion in half of them and still be able to take communion in the other one. We see that with Paul calling out Peter when he goes and sits at the only the tables of Jewish believers, and he calls them out and he takes them before the administrators and calls them out. Why? Because what Peter was doing in that local location was hurting not only the ministry of the local church, but then Peter had far extenuating circumstance as well as far as his influence, and so other people would emulate that, and so Paul was calling that out.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really helpful. Yeah. And then he talks about it in a letter that's not even to Peter, so that now he's exposing it, and so that's a really helpful example. I like that.
Yeah, and there's probably stuff that we don't see as well too. Did Paul ask Peter for permission? Like, hey, I think this is a really good example. Can I utilize this? There's definitely stuff that we don't see in Scripture that could provide even more background that we probably don't even get to.
Oh, I wish that we could have been there to see it. But then I remember how bad it was.
I don't know. Do you want to see that call out? No. I mean, that is a Paul Thug Life meme.
Oh yeah, I love that too. Like the idea of just this little squat, balding, guy that he's so. Every time I think about how like the scriptures they describe his looks, and I'm like, man, it must have been something to see this little balding dude be. So bold. I just think he got like Bodhi Bacham. Of course, he's like 8 feet tall. Yeah, nobody's gonna say anything to him. He's gonna go around do whatever he wants. Nobody is gonna argue with him. That's so funny. Okay, blasphemy. Here we go. Blasphemy. Y'all ready? Y'all ready for the blasphemy?
Can I just say one more person that I think that we don't recognize as well is the person who is growing in faith. I think about the beliefs that I had and the people that I followed at the very start of my walk. That I'm not going to call anybody out and say, oh, I don't think this, but there are people that I outgrew or that I transitioned away from their interpretation of a certain doctrine. Even coming to Calvinism, to Reformed theology. I mean, I remember listening to very godly people who put in my head that, oh, well, if you believe in Calvinism, what's the point of going to evangelize? Not understanding the entire history. But I mean, I grew up isolated as far as who I could talk to about that, because there was no Reformed person that I knew that there was anything different about that. So when we have people that do like Beth Moore and Joel Osteen and stuff like that, if they are believers, we should encourage them to come alongside them to train them up in the faith, and at some point, those false believers will fall away, because we're hopefully always turning them back to Scripture, and that they're growing in their faith. So
you could be the only Scripture that they hear is from you sitting down with them and opening the Bible. And
I love that, and graciously, lovingly, because I do remember, and I mention it all the time, that whenever I first became a Christian, I swung in a very opposite direction in a very imbalanced way, swaying all the way into Hebrew legalism, and that was because I came from a situation of where like the law was looked down upon. It wasn't something we were supposed to even read. And so I swung in the opposite direction, and there were believers that were very patient and loving about it, and they weren't aggressive. And my husband, bless his heart, he was so patient while I was telling him that, like, you know, on Sunday we can't cook. We have
to go out to eat today.
Not even the day. I know. I'm sorry, but yeah, no. So like, yeah, that's really helpful. I think that hopefully that will be a blessing. People calm down, be nice. You don't have to be. You don't have to immediately expect everybody to understand right away as they're believers. Let them grow slowly in their own.
I like that.
Yeah, you know, go to you know, your church and ask who you believe have been there for 15 years, and ask them to explain the Trinity, and see if they don't go into modalism. You
right.
know,
oh gosh.
Are you willing to ask Miss Francis that she's going to hell because she can't properly explain to you that you know that the being of God is something that you can't just say, oh, it's ice or it's the 4-leaf clover or whatnot.
I know. It's an egg, so it's like an egg, you know, where there's the yolk. Yes, exactly. Poor Miss Francis. She's not a heretic.
But before we've seen the Patrick, that's heresy video. That's super awesome. I mean, you know, I don't honestly think that I would have been like, oh, I'm clearly speaking blasphemy. I understood what the Trinity was, but I mean, good luck trying to explain it because it is so unique. Right. And so we do. I mean, that's how we tell stories as Americans. We're similes and metaphors and poetry. You know, we all come with that kind of wanting to anthropomorphize, you know, harder things because we want to relate to something else.
Right. Oh, I like that. You gotta be careful with Miss Francis. You can't be going up to her and
tell people that they're unsaved. Yeah, that's great.
She did James 5 visiting orphans and widows more than you ever did. So you know,
that's right.
Right.
Which is the reason why Miss Francis is not sure about how to explain that is because while we were all watching Dr. White videos, she was out feeding orphans. So be nice.
Right.
Be nice.
I like that. Give them preference.
Again, it's balance of everybody. That new believers should understand balance as far as like an immature teenager that believes that they're mature. There's clearly something more that I can learn, and us too. I am an unmature believer because I have not received my glorified body, and you know, Jesus hasn't slapped me down with righteous knowledge. And the people that want to call out blasphemy should be balanced as well, and not just wanting the clicks or the soundbite or, you know, the likes on Twitter. And then also the heretic should disown heresy and come to Christ.
Yeah,
and be balanced that way.
Also, I ordered my glorified body from Wish, and it was not the same.
What did you get?